Greetings, YouTube. The Doctor is in. Dr. Urias Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm starting a new series of videos. I wanted to kick it off today. I wanted to talk about all of the weapon masteries and go through them each at a time. But what I noticed was that there are only certain weapons that have certain weapon masteries. So we're going to kind of combine those into one series of commentary. Today we are going to talk about the weapon mastery Cleave, how it works, what weapons are useful with that, what properties those weapons have other than Cleave, what feats are good with that, what fighting styles are good with it, and what classes. All that, lots to talk about, lots to go over. Stay tuned and don't go away. All right, before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or a comment. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. And if you can, share the video as well. All right, we've got our obligatory card of notes here. I'm going to place this right up here, and we're going to go through this as best as we can. So, Cleave. We're not going to talk about Cleave right now. What we are going to talk about are the two weapons. There's only two that do have Cleave, and that is the Great Axe and the Halberd. So we are talking D&D 2024. We're going to talk about, like I said, all the stuff that go around this, all of these weapon properties, the Cleave mastery itself, some great feats that go along with this, some great classes, and how to put all that together so you can make the best Great Axe Halberd character that you can possibly make. All right, so again, we've got the Great Axe, we've got the Halberd. So the Great Axe has two properties, heavy and two-handed. The Halberd has three properties, heavy, reach, and two-handed, and that's it. So let's take a look at each one of those. But let's look at heavy first. So that is a weapon property. So it says you have disadvantage on attack rolls with heavy weapons if it's a melee weapon and your strength score isn't at least 13, or if it's a ranged weapon and your dexterity score isn't at least 13. So you got to have a 13 to use this. Otherwise, you've got disadvantage. So both of those particular items have that. So let's go back, and we'll go back up here. They've got all the properties. So they've got the table that has all of the actual weapons on them. Again, it's separated into simple, martial, and ranged. So obviously, Great Axe and Halberd are both martial melee weapons. So we've got heavy for both of them, so you've got to have a good strength. We've also got two-handed. Obviously, a two-handed weapon requires two hands. Now, the Halberd has one additional piece that goes along with it, and that is the reach piece. So a reach weapon adds 5 feet to your reach when you attack with it, as well as when determining your reach for opportunity attacks. Remember, opportunity attacks are when they leave your reach, then you get an attack. So if something is 10 feet from you and it leaves, it's going to get attacked. Now, one of the other big differences between these, the Great Axe does 1d12 slashing damage, and the Halberd does 1d10 slashing damage. Now, you want to keep that in mind because those things are keyed to certain feats that use slashing damage. So you need to keep that in mind. You can notice that some of these weapons do slashing damage, some do piercing damage, some do bludgeoning damage. And there's different feats associated with that. So if you want to really optimize this out, that's one of the things you have to keep in mind. Reach is another thing that we're going to keep in mind as well. So, okay, so we've talked about the properties of both of these weapons, the Great Axe and the Halberd. Now, there is another part of this table, if you look, and it's called the mastery. And each of these weapons has cleave. Now, the reason that I'm primarily talking about these two weapons is they are the only ones that have cleave. There are no other weapons here that have cleave. There's Vex, Slow, Push, all that. But none of the other ones have cleave. Like the Great Club doesn't have it. It's got Push, which we'll talk about that one later. But Cleave is the first one on the list of weapon masteries. So we are going to talk about that. So let's talk about it. So Cleave, here it is right here. It's the first one in the weapon mastery list. If you hit a creature with a melee attack roll using this weapon, that is the halberd or the great axe, you can make a melee attack roll with the weapon against a second creature within 5 feet of the first that is also within your reach. So that means if one creature is behind the other creature, you cannot make that cleave attack with the great axe, but you can make it with the halberd. So on a hit, the second creature takes the weapon's damage, but I don't like that they use conjectures in this. I wish they would I wish they'd use the full word. But do not add your ability modifier, which is going to be strength, to that damage unless that modifier is negative. So it only can penalize you. You can make this extra attack only once per turn. So if you got multiple attacks, it's not gonna proc off again. It's just gonna be once. But it is once, and that is a pretty good. That's a pretty good property. It's good if you are frontline and you are fighting multiple things. Otherwise, this one is pretty worthless. Cleave will not work if you are not fighting multiple targets, because you have to have multiple targets for it to work. So that's Cleave. That's what we want to talk about with Cleave. And each one of these has the Cleave property. Really the only difference between these, and the only reason that I might take a great axe versus a halberd, is the difference in damage. And really, it's not that much. A halberd on average does 5.5. A great axe on average does 6.5. That's 1 point. It's not really that great of a difference. I would really think about taking the reach weapon, the halberd weapon, because it adds to your reach. It doesn't penalize you for attacking something right next to you. It just adds to the reach. It's still heavy, and it's still two-handed, which is also the great axe. So now we've talked about heavy, two-handed, reach, and cleave. So let's talk a little bit about feats for these weapons. I've got the list of feats here in alphabetical order. We're going to go over each one of these, of the feats that I think are good or go well with these two weapons and the cleave, particularly with the cleave property, the weapon mastery. But if you think of anything else, leave it in the comments below, and we'll get to it. All right, so let's talk about the first one that I think is something that could be used for this. So I want to make sure I've got this. Okay, so we've got the first one, Charger. It is a general feat. It requires you to be level 4 and a strength or dexterity of 13. You have to have that anyway, because these are heavy weapons, so you have to have that strength, and they're based off of strength, so you've got to have that strength base of 13 or better. You gain the following benefits: 1 to your strength or dex. That's great, so we're going to take the 1 to our strength. You get improved dash. I don't particularly think this is the best thing in the world. If you take the dash action, your speed increases by 10 feet. That might be okay if you had some levels in Rogue that you could take dash as a bonus action. But other than that, it's not great. Now, the last part is the part that I'm talking about. If you move it at least 10 feet, not if you do the dash action, but if you move at least 10 feet in a straight line towards the target immediately before hitting it with a melee attack as part of the attack action, which we're going to do with our halberd, choose one of the following: gain a d8 to the damage roll, or push it up to 10 feet if it is no more than one size larger than you. If you're a Goliath, then there are certain abilities that you can use to make yourself large. So you could push something that's huge. You can use this benefit only once on each of your turns. So it's an extra D8, or you can push it 10 feet. And if that were to push it off of a cliff and it can't fly, well, so be it. Or push it into lava, then so be it. And that's why I've got that on there. So I put this one in here mainly because we're getting a bump to our strength, and we could get some extra damage. So Charger is not bad if you are wielding these weapons. All right. The next one, of course, is going to be our great weapon feat. So let's go all the way down here. We've got great weapon fighting and great weapon mastery. So great weapon fighting is a fighting style. So if you are able to get fighting styles, and there are certain classes that can do that, this might be one of the ones that you're going to take. So when you roll damage for an attack you make with a melee weapon that you are holding in two hands, so some of these are versatile. You can hold those in two hands, and some of these are two-handed. You treat any 1 or 2 on the damage die as a 3. And the weapon must have the two-handed or versatile property to gain this benefit. So that might be okay. It is not a feat, but it is a fighting style. So that might be something to think about. Now, Great Weapon Master is a feat. Now, this got nerfed from the Legacy version, but it still has its merits to it. So it gives us a bump to our strength score to a 20. It is a general feat, so it requires 4th level and a strength of 13. You get heavy weapon mastery, so when you hit a creature with a weapon that has the heavy property, which both the Great Axe and the Halberd do, as part of an attack action, you could cause the weapon to deal extra damage to the target. The extra damage equals your proficiency bonus, which could be anywhere from 2 to 5. Hue allows you, after scoring a critical hit with that melee weapon, to reduce a creature to 0, to make a 1 attack with the same weapon as a bonus action. So you probably could be making that attack quite often. And if you have a halberd, then you are going to be doing it at reach. Now, with this particular feat, combined with Charger, let's say you charge and you crit. Well, the charge is going to do extra damage, and the crit is going to cause you to use your bonus action to make an attack. And then, because it's got Cleave, you can also use the Cleave. So there, all those things can be combined. And just, let's not forget this Cleave that is here. Let's look at that again. If you hit a creature with a melee attack roll using this weapon, you can make a melee attack roll with a weapon against a second creature. That's not a bonus action. It just happens. So that is something that we want to keep in mind. So with the Hue, you can make the attack with the halberd. It's got Cleave, so you can make another attack against a different creature. And if you crit, you can make another attack as a bonus action against anything within reach. So those are great. So the Legacy Great Weapon Master didn't give a bump, didn't have the Hue. It still did have the Hue, but it allowed us to take a penalty on the attack roll to get a pretty big bump in damage, which we don't get anymore. Okay. The next feat that I want to talk about is Polearm Master, and this is probably the one that you should pay attention to the most. And it changed a little bit, but not too much. It's a general feat, strength or dex of 13. It increases your strength or dex by 1, which is great. You get the polearm strike immediately after you take the attack action and attack with a quarterstaff, a spear, or a weapon that has heavy and reach, which a halberd does. You can use a bonus action to make a melee attack with the opposite end of the weapon. The weapon deals bludgeoning damage, and the weapon's damage die for this attack is a D4. And you can still add all your other stuff. It doesn't say that you can't. You also get reactive strike. While you're holding a quarterstaff spear or a weapon that has heavier reach properties, you can take a reaction to make 1 melee attack against a creature that enters the reach you have with that weapon, which is really important with a halberd. This one, I think, is almost a prerequisite for all of those, and it does kind of go nicely with the Great Weapon Master. and with the new one. So you could get the critical, and that's a bonus action, or you could you can deal the extra damage, and then because this is a it's Polearm Master, so you're still gonna do extra damage with this D4 and with Cleave as well. So Cleave works really well with this because Cleave is not a bonus action. Okay, and you could knock something out, make an extra attack, or not knock something out, use the Cleave. You can do all kinds of combos with it. All right, next one on our list is Savage Attacker. So you trained to deal particularly damaging strikes once per turn. When you hit with a weapon, you can roll the weapon's damage twice and use either roll against the target. So that's okay. It's an origin feat, so it's free. So you could have Savage Attacker and Polearm Master at a later level. So that's perfectly fine. And this allows you to re-roll damage once per turn, which is pretty good. So that's kind of a freebie. I like these origin feats quite a bit because they're freebies. The next one that I'm going to talk about is Sentinel. It's a general feat, prereq of 4, strength or dex of 13. It gives us a bump of 1 to our strength or dex. Immediately after a creature within 5 feet of you takes the disengage action or hits a target other than you with an attack, you can make an opportunity attack, which is a reaction. So this gives you an extra attack, and it's just an extra attack, which is great. When you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, the creature's speed becomes 0. So with the Guardian, it's an opportunity attack. If you hit it, its strength becomes its speed becomes 0. So it's going to take the disengage or hit something else, and then maybe it's going to try and get away. So this is a good one too, but it is another feat that you would have to take. But if you take this one in Polearm Master with Savage Attacker, they're particularly nasty, giving you a bunch of extra attacks. You get an extra reactive attack from Sentinel that happens quite often, and you get a bonus action attack from the other end of your halberd, and you're going to get the Cleave attack as well, which is awesome. Okay, and the next one we're going to talk about is Slasher, and this one goes along. Remember I said pay attention to the type of damage, because the halberd and the great axe do slashing damage, so this is one of those. General feat, prereq of 4th level or higher. It bumps our strength and our dex by 1. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals slashing damage, you can reduce the speed of that creature by 10 feet. And when you score a critical that deals slashing damage to a creature, it has disadvantage on attack rolls until the start of your next turn. This is very different than the old Slasher from the Legacy version, but it's still pretty good. It is a general feat. It is giving us a bump to a score. So this with Polearm Master also could be pretty good. I don't know if you want to take all 3 of these. And the last feat that I want to talk about is Strike of the Giants. Let's see if I can find this here. STR, Strike of the Giants. So this comes from Big B's Presents Glory of the Giants. And there are a number of ones in here that are pretty good. So you have Absorb Primeval Magic that gives you an Echo of the Might of the Giants. When you take this feat, choose one of the benefits listed below. Once per turn, when you hit a target with a melee weapon attack or a ranged weapon attack using a thrown weapon, you can imbue the attack with additional effect depending on the benefit you choose. This is a feat, prereq martial weapon proficiency or giant foundling background. So it's a feat that's outside of a book, so you can only take this when you can take a feat. So we've got Cloud Strike, extra D4 of thunder damage, and they got to make a wisdom saving throw or you become invisible. Fire is 1d10, frost 1d6, constitution saving throw or their speed is reduced to 0. I like that. Hill Strike is probably one of my favorites. It's a d6, and then they have to make a strength saving throw or they have the prone condition. Stone is a d6. It has to make a strength saving throw or it's pushed. And Storm is a d6, and the creature has to make a con saving throw. It has a disadvantage on its next roll. The DC for these are 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your con or constitution. And then you can use this feat a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all uses after a long rest. So this is just a little bit of added extra flavor, but I think these would be good with those. Now let's finally talk about classes that I think go well with the Great Axe and the Halberd and the Cleave property. Now, some of these classes can use properties and some of them cannot, so you have to pay attention to that. The Barbarian is one of these that can use weapon masteries, so let's talk about that. There's Rage, there's Unarmored Defense, and then at level 1 you get Weapon Mastery. So your training with weapons allows you to use the mastery properties of 2 kinds of simple or martial melee weapons of your choice. When you finish a long rest, you can practice weapon drills and change. So essentially you would do Great Axe or Halberd. I like the Berserker or the Zealot just because the Berserker subclass gets an extra attack, and I like the Zealot because the Zealot has the Divine Fury, which does some extra damage with that. The next class that I want to talk about is the Fighter, of course, because the Fighter is another one of these classes that gets to take advantage of these weapon masteries. So Fighter does get a fighting style. We did talk about a fighting style, which was great weapon fighting, which was pretty good. That's almost a freebie. And then you get this weapon mastery at level 1, so your training with weapons allows you to use the mastery properties of 3 different kinds of simple or martial weapons of your choice, and then you can change them around. But of course, you can choose Cleave. And for the Fighter, we like the Battle Master because we get all these maneuvers that you can use to push, to knock prone, things like that. We also like the Champion because the Champion gets an improved crit. And remember, Great Weapon Master procs off crits. So you have an extra 5% chance to crit. In addition to additional fighting styles, you're a remarkable athlete, all that stuff. And then the last class that I want to talk about that goes along with this is the Paladin. Because the Paladin also gets to take advantage of weapon masteries at first level. Your training with weapons allows you to use masteries of 2 kinds of weapons of your choice, which you have proficiency. And you have proficiency in all melee weapons and martial weapons, so you could choose Halberd, you could choose Great Axe. In addition, at 2nd level, you get a fighting style feat, which could be Great Weapon Master. Now, for the Paladin for this, I like the Oath of Vengeance because it allows you to do Vow of Enmity, which I think is great, and have an advantage on attack rolls is awesome. So that is pretty much it. That is my take on the Cleave Weapon Mastery that is attached to the Halberd and the Great Axe. And we have told you about the properties of those weapons. We have told you about the Cleave Weapon Mastery. We have told you about what feats we think go well with those weapons and that particular mastery and those properties. We have also talked about what classes meld well with all of those, the properties, the masteries, and the feats. So that is the video I have for everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed, and I will catch everybody later.